Well, welcome, Kathleen Elle. I'm Karen Truesdell, and I'm super excited to interview you about your new book. You want to just tell us a little bit about your new book?
Definitely. Thank you for having me, Karen. It's just
Sure.
a delight to be here with you. The new book is called Shattered Together, A Mother's Journey from Grief to Belief. It's a guide to assist other people to move through their sudden loss. And the book is about my journey over the last 10 years. It's a little memoir, it's a little how to, and it's a little inspiration because 10 years ago, my son actually took his life. And when he took his life, he was mad at me and he wrote a note saying he didn't want me at his service. So, hence the title Shattered Together, because I was truly shattered and just it was a very painful time of my life. And it took, over the last 10 years, I've really invested in healing and my goal or our goal, because I really feel like this was a universal book that was done in partnership with Spirit and myself, and it was done as a partner. So it's a universal book that I get to be a part of.
And was writing the book part of your healing process?
Oh, it definitely was, Karen. I actually wrote an entire third of the book and scrapped it. And so I worked with a partner, a ghostwriter. Well, they're called ghostwriters, but her name is Amanda. So I worked with this woman that I've known for years who has been a writer. And so she knew my journey as well as, uh, has been a friend of mine. And so I worked with her. And so there were interviews and there were editing. And so the whole first third of the book was painful. It was difficult to write. It felt like I was pushing uphill the entire time. And both of us sat down and said, this doesn't feel like it's working. And so, how can we shift the direction we head in? So, we scrapped the first third and started all over again. So, it was definitely a cathartic
So
process.
yeah, that part was healing.
Yeah, well, it was healing and painful. And, in this book here on chapter 16, it is called Forgiving Yourself. And chapter 16, even just a couple months ago, she had written a draft and it wasn't quite right. And I had to go in and edit it and make it more accurate. And I had to put the book down for 3 days. I had to just like, I don't know. It was so painful to revisit that particular and that experience.
The self forgiveness part. That
Yes, it's about forgiving yourself. And so there was a thought I had when I was pregnant for my son. I don't want to give too much because it's the chapter, but the self-blame of not sharing this with anyone, that basically my husband and I were having some challenges, and then I find out I'm pregnant and I'm like, oh no, like not a good idea. Um, and so there were other complications there, and my son was born with this cord wrapped around his neck twice. He had projectile vomiting and he was colicky, and it was just like one turmoil after another. So long story short, I felt like I caused that, and then I ultimately caused the suicide of my son. Like that's how.
was the thinking.
Right, exactly. That's how our stories can take control. Right, exactly. That our stories take control over our body, over our mind, over our function, over our logic, even because,
Mhm.
for 27 years, I hid that inside and I never said anything to anyone until I did an event with Jack Canfield and I was on a stage. And, there was a whole process. And I talk about the process in the book and how healing it was, because I shared the story, and um, he just looked at me in the end and said, did you love him when he was born? I'm like, oh my God, of course I did. And he was holding my hand, his little hand would wrap around my finger and he was the most comfortable on my chest. And I'm like, oh, wow. Like for 27 years, I've been beating myself up. And it's just a huge awareness of what we do to ourselves and the torture of living in self-shame and hiding and blame and guilt and unworthiness and all the emotions that society really doesn't encourage us to move through. Society really, up until this point, has really encouraged us to like shove it down, mask it, prescribe drugs,
Right.
like it, avoid it,
We
workaholic.
yeah,
Yeah. So, yeah, so natural healing has been a really big part of my journey. And that's really what I want people to know. They don't have to hide in shame. They don't have to, like, it doesn't have to stick with you. And as you feel it and move through it, it truly moves through your body and it no longer has control with you. You're no longer caught in that self prison of guilt and shame and blame. So
so what would you recommend to someone who's kind of in the throes or at the beginning of a crisis or a significant emotional event, like where they're just trying to get through the hour, like
right.
pain, the unspeakable pain?
I hear you, and I call it the grief prescription, and it's the 3 B's. It's be, breathe, and believe. And
I love
this could be for a divorce, it could be for a job loss, it could be for a diagnosis that you had that just throws you off kilter. It could be for anything at all, stress at all. So it's be in the moment. Don't look too far out into the future because
that.
we create stories based on the fear that we're living right now. So the stories we create, we're creating anxiety, depression, angst, all the negative emotions because we don't know what's going to happen. So if we focus on the next minute, the next hour, the next day, the next week, whatever's most doable for you in your process, that's what you focus on. And how you can do that is by participating in a breathing exercise. And I recommend the 4 squared breathing exercise where you breathe into the count of 4, you hold it to the count of 4, you release it to the count of 4, and then you hold it. Yeah, hold it, breathe in, hold it, release it, hold it for 4.
The process again.
And then you do it 4 times in a row. And so what that does for you is it brings you back into the moment, it grounds you. It also moves your oxygen and your energy in your system because we hold our breath when we're actually in trauma in the moment. While breath flows in, it doesn't flow in deeply. So you're more likely to become ill.
I
And
love
so
that.
by,
Love the 4 and 4, like 4 times
yeah,
4 square, not just
yeah,
in for 7. Like I just,
right.
I love the
It's just easy to remember too. It's the 4
right.
squared. You just see a box in your head as you breathe into the count of 4. You can see the box, and you just do it 4 times in a row when you find yourself in anxiety. And the third is believe. Believe you're not alone. Believe that you can make it through this. Believe that there are other people who have been through something very similar as you or the same, and that they're there to help you. And believe you're connected to a higher power. Believe that this is not going to be the way your life has to be.
Right.
Like in this moment, it's not always going to be this way. Just keep moving forward, one step at a time, 1 hour at a time.
Yeah. When you went over, I guess over the past decade, have you learned to receive help from other people? I mean, was that something
Yes.
that you were comfortable doing before, or how?
No, I knew early on I needed something. Early on, I went to a grief specialist. I had a grief specialist
Mhm,
that I worked with. She was not a counselor or a psychologist, but she was a grief specialist.
mhm,
Then I ultimately eventually went to a cognitive thought therapist, and then I did PTS treatment, post-traumatic stress treatment, not for Logan's suicide because I was working through that, but for the trauma that broke open from Logan's suicide from my childhood. So as an early child, a young child, early child, in my earlier years, my birth father was abusive. He was an alcoholic. He actually even shot at us as children, as young infants, toddlers. There was sexual abuse. There was emotional abuse. There was all kinds of trauma in my earlier years. Fortunately, my mom had the courage to be able to leave, and I had an amazing stepdad that adopted me. And so fortunately I didn't have to live with that all my life. And yet I lived with that all my life because from 0 to 8 is how we are programmed to live our life.
Yes.
What we experience as young children is how we are programmed to live our life, how to react to our life until we become aware there's a different way to respond to life.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
So Logan's passing brought all that trauma up.
Oh, it definitely
I mean,
did.
it was good that you healed from that.
Yeah. Yeah. I went through this healing process. It's called regenerating images and memory. That's been the most amazing experience that I've had over the last 3 years now. I was working with Jack Canfield on the Train the Trainer, Canfield methodology, success
Right,
principles.
right,
And Dr. Deborah Stendella has this energy healing process where you just go within your body and you connect to the first time that really caused that trauma, that emotion, that feeling, and
right.
you're able to create a new memory. I mean, I'm in short, I'm saying that now. I'm a master RIM facilitator because it was such a big difference in my life that I was able to see. I'll just give an example. My mom, I didn't realize this, but until Logan's transition, I was really resentful and angry at my mom for staying with a man who shot at us. And, and the story I had told myself from that experience is that I'm unlovable, I'm not worthy. Why can't you just leave? Like I had such judgment around the situation.
Right.
When he shot at us, I was actually put behind the toilet and my mother and sister were in the bathtub. So the story I created at that moment is that I wasn't worthy enough to be in the bathtub, that I wasn't being loved enough to be in the bathtub with them. But in fact, there wasn't enough room in the bathtub, and it was the safest place for me to be. But I lived all these years with this program, and I didn't even know why I was so angry with my mom.
Mhm.
And now I look back and I'm like, based on the reprogramming and the new awareness that I have within my body, it's like, oh my gosh, my mom chose to be beat on a regular basis so she could keep her kids, so she didn't lose her children. And it's different then than what it is today. There are many other resources that people can get. She lived in the fear of not being able to care for her children at all. And so she chose to be beaten and tortured
To
so
keep
she could, right. So she
like
could
what did
provide the best. Right. So she provided the best she could with what she had, and she loves us with all her heart. And so what a difference my life is, and her life too, based on being able to go in and energetically dissolve and recreate memories within your body. Because the trauma that we go through, we're holding, but we're also holding our parents' trauma and our grandparents' trauma.
generation?
Right. And so think about our grandparents holding their parents and their grandparents. So we're holding this whole lineage of programs in our bodies we don't even realize we're responding to life with. It's pretty
It's pretty
fascinating.
deep. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how
Yeah.
are you using RIM to help people? Are you,
Oh, in every way
I
possible,
mean, I suppose with any trauma or any significant emotional event.
it doesn't even have to be a significant emotional event. Now there's sexual abuse events, there's all kinds of events that people experience, and then they use RIM to help themselves through that. Um, it could just be stress at work. It could be anything at all. And it could be that you cried too long in the crib. Like it could be as simple as that, and still feel like you've programmed yourself that you were rejected or neglected or whatever. It could be as simple as that. And you respond to life based on that little simple little
Nuance. Yeah.
nuance, right? Yeah. And so as a facilitator, I get to facilitate the client. So the client is the one that leads the process with RIM. And then as an energy healer, I also channel energy, and I'm guided to if there's energy in your body, I know where it is. I know that, where it started. And
Right.
then I use that energy to help heal that. So there's two different modalities. One, the client's in total control, and the other, there's the divine sharing with me, so I can share with the client and they can confirm or deny, or whatever the process
Right.
is. Yeah.
What do you do? What do you practice personally? Do you practice yoga, or what do you practice like movement wise to keep yourself?
I actually do CrossFit.
Oh, I did not expect that. I love it. But I mean, there's movement. There's
Yeah, there's different kinds of movement. So I do CrossFit. I love cardio. Like, a cardio is definitely, like, I enjoy cardio.
Mhm.
What I do to connect is really meditation, gratitude, affirmations, acknowledgements of self. So I have a whole daily practice that I do every day. I draw oracle cards that help inform my day before it starts, and just to create an awareness that, so when the oracle cards are kind of just, it's additional information. So if something happens during the day, I can look back on that oracle card and respond differently than
Okay.
what I would have based on the information that I received in the morning.
What was your oracle card for today?
Today, it was number 33, Heaven Sent. And 33, I always know that it's very special because 33 is my son's basketball jersey number. So anytime he played basketball, 33 was his number. So 33 comes up often. So there's a sign that he's around when 33 comes up often. So there was a little added confirmation this morning that he would be around today. And it's interesting. I woke up at 3:03 this morning
Wow.
and didn't go back to sleep.
That's confident.
Yeah, exactly. So it was just like, oh, okay,
That's
thank
pretty
you.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, what's next for you? Are you writing, or what's next in the works?
I'm actually writing a chapter in Women Who Empower, which will be out in December, sometime in December. And Women Who Empower Women Who Rise is the preamble basically to Shattered Together. So Women Who Rise was the more detailed, immediate experience of the suicide. And Shattered Together is your how-to, your daily practices. Each chapter has a daily practice that you can incorporate into your day or not. And whoever's going through any kind of sudden loss, you can actually just open up the book. If a chapter in the book sings to you, then
That's
calls you, then you can just go right there and start there. You don't have to read the whole book. So it's the how to move through the grief. And then Women Who Empower is about what healing can do for you. I went from really self-loathing, not really liking myself, to living a really fulfilled, connected, joyous life. Like, I feel so blessed to live in the life that I have, to have the guidance that I have, to have the partners I have. It's just really, it's awesome.
wow, wonderful. So that'll be in December on Amazon,
Yes, yes.
and we can
And
buy
then,
your book on Amazon right now.
exactly. And I've got a program that's the complement to Shattered Together called From Grief to Belief, Stepping Stones. This is an 8-week virtual program for anybody who's gone through a sudden and unexpected loss of a loved one through the holidays. So where I will be walking through the holidays with you on an 8-week program.
Okay. And how can people find that?
CathleenElle.com. So right on my website, it's CathleenElle.com. And so there's the Stepping Stones program, and I have a virtual sacred healing circle that I do twice a week. That's on the website as well.
Okay.
So,
Wow. Well, thank
yeah.
you so much. Any last minute tip or nugget to
Yeah, invest in yourself. That would be that
okay.
would be the ultimate tip, is invest in you, because if you don't invest in you, then you can't help anyone else.
That's beautiful.
You can for a period of time, but not for a long period of time.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you. Not,